Alhamdulillah. I'll begin by saying that I'm very happy to be back in Madison, in the new masjid that we've been working on for I think 14 years at this point. For those who don't know me, I was a part of this community. I moved away about 10 years ago. And the city of Madison, this community, the people here, this masjid, they all have a really special place in my heart. And I miss it a lot. So I'm very happy to be back here, to see the beautiful, completed masjid, and to see the people that I knew, and a lot of new faces as well, alhamdulillah. And I'm happy to be able to share this presentation with you. It's something that I feel passionately about, and I love talking about it. I'd love to hear your questions after the talk, inshallah. I have a lot of slides. I don't think I'll go through all of them, because I want to focus on the second part. But we can get through some of the other stuff in the questions if you're so interested. So we'll talk about AI and generative AI, artificial intelligence and generative artificial intelligence. And I'll begin with the definition just to kind of set the stage for what we're talking about. Typically, when people talk about AI, they're talking about computer systems that are capable of doing the cognitive tasks that we normally associate with human beings. Things like perception and reasoning and learning. So what I mean by those is things like hearing and seeing, or things like comprehension and planning and problem solving, or things like learning, which is improving in how you do something based on feedback. So when a computer system can do these things, we say that it's artificially intelligent. Now, AI is already very pervasive in our lives, whether you recognize it or not. The way that pricing is determined for the things that we buy. The way that search engines figure out what you're looking for. When you type something into a search engine, and when your friend types something else, types the same thing into the same search engine, you get wildly different results. And that's again partly because of AI. The way that we talk to customer service, the way that even prison sentences are recommended, the way that a company decides if they want to interview you, the way that a company decides if they should give you a free trial because they think that you'll turn into a paying customer. The way that your fraudulent transactions are flagged on your credit card, your Amazon recommendations, your Uber driver match. Your life is very likely touched by dozens and dozens of AI models every day already. And yet, there's been a revolution that's been happening on the research front, on generative AI. And it kind of burst onto the scene a couple years ago when ChatGPT came out, when it got really huge. Right? It went just beyond prediction. It kind of went into generating media, generating content. And we've all seen some really impressive examples. I'll go through some, and these aren't even the most impressive examples out there. It's able to generate stories, summarize documents, even write and debug computer code. People have used it to write entire khutbahs from scratch. And we'll get to why that might be a little bit problematic later. It's able to pass the final exam of a prestigious MBA course. It placed in the top 10% of the bar exam. It can proofread your resume and your essay. It'll even write your essay for you. It can generate recipes for you. And so AI has been around. It's been helping us improve the quality of our lives over the past couple decades or so, more noticeably. But generative AI is a step function change. What I mean by that is that it's a kind of disruptor. It's shaking the way that we do things, and it enables a vast medley of new things that we were not able to do before. So here's a few really simple examples of what ChatGPT can do. And we've all seen a lot of these really cool examples. I told ChatGPT, and this is last year, this isn't even very recent, I told it to write me a short essay on the harms of an interest-based economy. And if you're interested, you can kind of read through some of the paragraphs that it came up with. Right? It talks about how one of the key harms is prioritizing short-term gains over long-term sustainability and well-being. It talks about wealth inequality. It talks about concentration of wealth in the hands of a few. It talks about exacerbating social tensions. It talks about eroding trust in institutions, hindering social mobility, and finally, ultimately weakening the fabric of society. And it did this in like 3 seconds, right? For us, we believe that riba is forbidden because Allah made it forbidden for us. That Allah knows what is good for us and what is bad for us, and that's why it's forbidden. It's bad for us as individuals, as communities, as nations. It harms the way that money circulates or doesn't circulate in society. And so it's possible that some of the reasons that ChatGPT came up with, it's possible that some of these are part of the illah, or the reason of Allah's prohibition. Here's another example. I was driving a friend back from where I live to the city of Seattle, and he asked me about going to a very scenic part of the state that we're in, Washington State, and being like, what do I do there? And I've been there a few times, so I spent like 20 minutes working out an itinerary with him for, well, you know, first you drive here, and then you stop here, and don't miss this lake, and don't miss that viewpoint, and don't miss those waterfalls. So we spent, you know, a good 20 minutes going back and forth about itinerary. And when I got back, I was curious, and I said, well, did I do any better than ChatGPT? And so I asked ChatGPT to come up with an itinerary for the Olympic Peninsula, which is a part of Washington State. And it came up with a very similar itinerary. You can read through it on the screen if you're interested, but it's very similar. And it took, again, a few seconds of time. It didn't take 20 minutes of my time. You can use it to generate code. Here's an example. I don't really want to go through it. Before I came here, oh, by the way, what I want to say is, I have a friend in Seattle who has zero coding experience. His degree is in finance. And he was able to get ChatGPT to write code to scrape a website and gather certain data that he wanted from it for a personal project. He's never coded in his life before. But in a few hours, he was able to talk to it, have it back and forth, have it generate code, run that code, get the data that he wanted, and then move on with this project. And in fact, there's some big software companies that think that they can have mid-level software engineers by the end of this year. So there's some companies that have said that they're really slowing down hiring, possibly even freezing hiring for the rest of this year, because they think that people can have AI teammates that do the work just as well as them. I'm not going to give my opinion on that, now at least. Yesterday, I asked her to come up with an example. So when I lived in Madison, I loved Madison. When I moved to Seattle, I missed Madison for a good year or two, and then the mountains grew on me, and the alpine lakes grew on me. Madison has lakes, it doesn't have alpine lakes. And so I asked ChatGPT to combine the best of both worlds. And so it came up with a picture of Madison, which we know is very flat, but it put a mountain range behind the state capitol. Looks very realistic, right? So we're kind of mixing and matching places that don't belong to each other. I asked it another time to generate an example, not of two places not matching, but a time and a place not matching up. So this is a picture, a fictional picture of the fall of Constantinople in the late 1400s. And I asked it to generate a picture of a fighter jet at the fall of Constantinople. And this is what it came up with. Again, it's able to generate these pictures in about 8 seconds. And this is an anachronistic picture, right? The time and place don't quite match. And you can do this now on your laptop, pretty much, with some of the newer models. And I'm being a little bit ridiculous, intentionally, right? These pictures are just for fun. But you can imagine what people are capable of, right? Imagine people generating pictures and passing them around on WhatsApp groups. Imagine somebody generating a picture of the Pope, for example, making sajda at the Kaaba. Imagine that picture bouncing around all the groups, right? Imagine a video of your favorite imam endorsing a politician. And it's not all bad, right? I don't want to only alarm you. Imagine Sheikh Al-Hajj is giving a lecture. I know you guys had a workshop on Ashrat al-Sa'a a few days ago. Imagine as Sheikh Al-Hajj is doing the seminar, it's translated instantly to 20 languages. And Sheikh Al-Hajj is delivering the lecture in Japanese with the right mouth movements and the right accent and the right voice simultaneously in like 20, 30, 100 different languages, so that people all over the world can benefit from the same lecture. So I don't only mean to alarm you, I also mean to open eyes to possibilities. AI has gotten so good, especially some of the deep research capabilities, that it's able to generate business plans It's not showing here, but I had an example of a business plan here where a professor of business at Wharton went back and forth with one of the AI models and was able to generate a business plan that he would have given a top grade to through the deep research functionality. AI can even do poetry. This isn't a great example, but one of my friends asked it to generate some classical Arabic poetry in the style of a very well-known pre-Islamic poet named Imr al-Qais. And so this poem, one of his famous poems, is about a lost love. And so my friend, being a little bit cheeky, asked it to generate a picture or a poem over a lost bowl of mansaf. And for the desis here, it could be a lost bowl of biryani, for example, right? And so it came up with this poem in the style, again, of Imr al-Qais. I'll give you a few seconds to read through the translation. It's not great. It's not great. And this, again, about a year old at this point, this example. So it's probably a lot better now. But it's able to just generate poetry, again, in a few seconds, in the style of a particular poet from over 1,000 years ago. Another thing that a lot of us don't know about is in the area of medical sciences. AI is able, so one of the most difficult problems for people who work in biology and protein specifically is predicting shapes of proteins. So you can design protein sequences all you want, but if they don't fold in the way that you need them to fold, it's useless. So one of the most incredible things we're able to do with generative AI is to make proteins, is to predict their shape and then actually generate them in a wet lab. The hype hasn't really quite caught on yet, but I think this is one of the directions that has the potential to really change our lives. I don't really want to get into this. I'm not a biologist. I cannot speak about it with the expertise that it deserves. But I just want to say that being able to predict the structure for 99% of proteins that don't occur naturally and synthesizing them in a lab opens up a lot of doors to create antibodies without going through a very costly drug design and trial process, right? What if you know the shape of what you want to create? AI can come up with a protein sequence that folds into exactly the shape that you need. It'll help you create it in the lab, and you're done. So this opens up a lot of possibilities. There's a lot more you can do with it, right? Imagine telling your AI assistant to write an email for you, or to call a seller on Craigslist for that desk you want to buy, right? Or to call your barbershop and schedule an appointment. Generative AI can generate its own code, its own algorithms. Today, if you have an application in mind, you need a team of software developers and a year of time and a few product managers and program managers to write any moderately large application. And once you do that, it can only do that one thing. It can only do that one application. Maybe it's a piece of tax software, or maybe it's software for a dentist office. But now you can generate this pretty much on the fly. Imagine the applications where your computer can generate its own code, think through its own algorithms to accomplish something. I have a friend in Seattle. He has an education startup. And so he develops materials in English, and he was going to spend all of last year translating stuff that he had developed in English into 6 different languages. So he had lined up expert speakers from those 6 languages, and he had lined up the money to fund it. And he was going to spend all of last year just translating and expanding the reach of his product. And ChatGPT comes along and does it for him in like an afternoon. It translates all of the materials that his team had painstakingly created, and it's done. His work for the year is done in an afternoon. So there's a lot of opportunities. And the thinking in business circles is that the day is not far off where you have a one-person unicorn. And so what that means in startup lingo is you have a company that's worth $1 billion. So imagine one person using AI to come up with a unicorn. Today, you've heard of unicorns, right? You've heard of Uber, you've heard of all these companies that started out as these disruptors, and then they grew in value, they grew in valuation to be over $1 billion. And usually they have a few dozen employees or more. But imagine now one person with one brilliant idea, and they're able to use AI to create that product and become a unicorn, so to speak. Okay, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this again, but I do want to peel back the hood just a little bit to kind of show you how they work, just because I want you to know how they work so you don't treat them as some sort of oracle, some sort of perfect thing that always gives you the right answer. Going to get just a little bit technical. I'm not going to get into it, but generally we begin with language models. So we figure out if we see a bunch of words, what is the next likely word? So you study language, you study paragraphs that human beings have written or spoken, and you kind of figure out, okay, so this is how people speak. This, typically when they say this word, the next word is usually this. And then the word after that is usually this, right? Computers, obviously, they don't have an understanding of language. All they understand is zeros and ones. And so we find ways of representing language as zeros and ones. And so the way the language models are constructed is that they look at large amounts of text. Imagine all of Wikipedia, and they just count. How many times does this word occur in the entire Wikipedia? How many times does this pair of words occur in all of Wikipedia? How many times do these three words occur one after another in all of Wikipedia? And by doing this sort of statistical frequency analysis, you build up a language model. This is not exactly how large language models work, but it kind of gives you an idea of how we think about language when it comes to processing them with computers. Okay, so I think that's enough about language models. And then the next piece you want to understand is called neural networks. And so what happens with neural networks is you take data that represents something, and you want to do something with it. So maybe you take a picture. Maybe you take a sentence. Maybe you take an MRI scan. Maybe you take information about a debit card transaction. And you transform it into some numerical representation, and then you pass it through a network. And what I mean by passing it through a network is that you take your numerical representation, and then you do a lot of multiplication and additions to it. And at the end, you get back some result. So that result might tell you, for example, that the picture that you showed me, the picture is actually of a bunch of mountains. Or it's a cat. Or the sentence you showed me is actually a noun sentence. Or that MRI scan you showed me shows me that this person actually has this brain disease. Or this debit card transaction that you showed me is actually fraudulent because this person lives in California and his debit card was used at a gas station in New Jersey at 2 in the morning. And so we think it's a fraudulent transaction. So that's what a neural network does. It takes in some information and it passes it through a network. It does a lot of multiplication and additions, and then it comes up with some answer, some prediction about what you showed it. If you remember matrices from high school, you can represent what a neural network does as a series of matrix multiplications. Now, how does a network know what to output at the end of it? How does it know that's a picture of a cat? How does it know there was a fraudulent debit transaction? How does it know that the MRI scan of your brain that you showed it showed some sort of abnormality? How does it know that? And so making that neural network know those things is called training it. And the way that you do it is that you show it a lot of data you've seen in the past. You show it lots of MRI scans of normal and abnormal formations in the brain. You show it billions of examples of debit card transactions that are not fraudulent and some that are fraudulent. You show it hundreds of thousands of pictures of mountains and cats and buildings and whatever else. And you teach it. And so the way that the training works is that first you show it something and then it makes some computation. It's never seen anything before. It's probably wrong. And so what you do is when it's wrong, you go back and you update the weights in that network. When it's right, you don't do anything. And so when you do that hundreds of thousands of times, billions of times, trillions of times, the weights get adjusted so that when it sees something in the future, it largely gets it right. All right? So that's the training part of it. I'm not going to get into the math of this. This is a math light talk. I know everybody has their notebooks and pencils out, but we're not going to get into the math of it. Okay. It's actually very simple math. It's just high school math. If you remember the chain rule from derivatives, matrix multiplication, things like that. But the key is that you do it trillions of times. trillions of times. If you've heard of deep neural networks, it's really just the same neural network concept, but there's just a lot of layers. There's a lot of multiplications, a lot of additions, right? That's what makes them deep. And then, again, if you're interested, the thing that really changed the field with neural networks is this specific architecture of neural networks called transformers. It's a paper that came out of Google in late 2017. This is a specific architecture that led to large language models as you see them today. So all the models, Llama, GPT, Mistral, Claude, all of these models are based on these really large transformer architectures. And then finally, I just want to talk maybe a little bit about word embeddings. The way that you transform text into numerical representations is that you want to preserve some sort of meaning to those words when you convert them to numbers. So for example, you take the word cat and kitten, for example, and you transform them into their numerical representations. And ideally what you want is, because cat and kitten represent very similar concepts, they're similar to each other than they are from the word house or from the word dog, for example. And so you want the numerical representation of similar concepts to have similar values, to be close to one another in that numerical representation. So these are called word embeddings. When we see a word, we kind of have a sense of what it means, right? We've seen it in books, we've seen our parents speak that word. We have an intuitive understanding of the concept behind a word, but computers don't, right? Computers only understand numbers and zeros and ones. So an embedding is really just a fancy way of saying it's some numerical representation of a word, and it somehow captures a part of the meaning of that word based on how close it is to other words of similar meanings. Now, what are LLMs predicting? So I said that you build these neural networks and they predict something at the end. What's that got to do with ChatGPT? These large language models, they're what's called autoregressive. So they're trained to predict text. The way that they work is that you show them a paragraph of text, and they will predict you what word comes next. So if I showed my LLM the sentence, the best thing about AI is its ability to. If I showed it this sentence, I took the sentence, I transformed it into its numerical representation, and I ran it through the whole network, it would predict a word after this. And that word could be learn, it could be predict, it could be make, it could be understand, it could be do, it could be so many other words. And what the LLM does is that it picks one of these. And that's the next word. And then it takes all of this, and it feeds it back through the same process again, and it predicts the next word, and the next word, and the next word. So the task for LLMs is to predict a word given some context that came before it. How do they know that? How do they know what word comes after that? It's because they've seen billions of documents. They've seen billions of documents of text that we've produced as human beings to kind of know that when you see this string of 10 words, the most likely next word is X. They've seen that billions of times, so now they know what to do with it when they see a brand new situation. So that's all it does. It's looked at a bunch of text, and it looks at what you fed it, your prompt, and it predicts what's the next word. If my prompt is, write me an essay about the harms of a riba-based economy, it takes that prompt, and then it says, the next word should be the. And then the next word after that should be something else, and something else. It's just predicting the next word based on what it's seen in the past. That's all it's doing. And now you know how it's doing that, right? It takes those words, transforms them to some numbers, pushes them through a neural network, gets a prediction, and moves on. Okay? That's really all it is. But this should now start raising some alarm bells in your mind about things like correctness. If it just predicts something, how do you know it's correct? If I ask it how to get to Woodman's from here, and it gives me a list of directions, how does it know that when I get out of the masjid, I turn right? How does it know? It doesn't know that. It doesn't know that necessarily. It just says, well, I'm going to tell whoever asked me to turn, and then the word after that could be right or left. They both fit. Because of what I've seen in the past, it's going to be some direction. It could be right, it could be left, we don't know. What about things like factuality? How do we know that what they produce is factual? If all we're doing is predicting the next word based on what we've seen in the past, how do we know that what it's generating is factual? And the answer is that we don't. We don't know that. So, very briefly, an LLM is a transformer-based deep neural network that predicts a word based on surrounding words. That's just one of the main takeaways, all right? If your attention drifted and you're interested in the question of this talk, now is the time to drift back. These machines are trained for one task and one task only. Make a prediction for the next word. That is all that they're trained to do. Just out of curiosity, I compiled some statistics about GPT-4. GPT-4, we think, and again, OpenAI is not very open about the details of their models. And so we think that it has about 1 trillion parameters, somewhere of that order, at least hundreds of billions. We think that it probably cost about $100 million to train. And what I mean by that is that, remember those billions of documents I talked about and how they ran it through those neural networks to predict the next word, to teach it what word to predict? They did that trillions of times. And to do that cost them $100 million. And it took about 5 or 6 months. And it took them a fleet of 10,000 GPUs. If you don't know what GPU is, it's like a processing unit. Like most of our computers have CPUs in them. GPUs are optimized for the kinds of matrix multiplications that neural networks need. So they had a fleet of the order of 10,000 of these processing units running nonstop for 5 or 6 months, night and day. And that's why it cost them $100 million to train. And each one is running 300, let me count, 1,000, million, billion, trillion, 300 trillion multiplications every single second. 10,000 of these for 5 or 6 months. And it took about 70 megawatts. That's enough energy to power a city like Madison for about a month. That's how much energy it took to train GPT-4. And every time you ask GPT-4 a question, every time you give it a prompt and it generates an answer for you, it boils about a teaspoon worth of water. It expends that much energy in generating the answer to your query. Okay, why do they work? And here's an interesting quote that I found in a paper from a while ago. One of the authors of the original Transformers paper says, he's talking about something very specific. He's talking about why a very specific architecture works, but it kind of applies to the whole enterprise. He says, we offer no explanation as to why these architectures seem to work. We attribute their success, as all else, to divine benevolence. We don't really know why deep neural networks work as well as they do. We don't really understand that. When I was in graduate school, again, not that long ago, right? I left Madison 10 years ago. But if you told me back then, when I was in grad school, that you could build models with billions of free parameters, I would say you're crazy. You could never get that model to learn anything useful. But the fact is that we are able to do that, and we don't know why. So this far surpasses what we thought these techniques are capable of. And it's what's called emergent behavior. We don't expect to see this behavior. Now, I want to talk about some of the issues with these LLMs, with using them the way they are. And I alluded to it a bit before, right? So if I want to get to Woodman's, how do I know whether to turn left or right? And sometimes these large language models, they just make stuff up. They just make stuff up, sometimes. And when that happens, we call them hallucinations. And the thing is, if you think about it, they're really always just making stuff up. If I ask it a question, it's just predicting the next word. It's making up what the next word should be. It's always, 100% of the time, it's making stuff up. And sometimes it happens to be correct. That's one way of looking at it, right? Just because a word fits there, based on the billions of examples you've seen in the past, doesn't mean that it's correct. So here's some examples from the past couple of years about stuff that ChatGPT has said. So ChatGPT said, for example, that a mayor, I think this was in England, a mayor was corrupt, that he took bribes. Somebody asked him, tell me about so-and-so person, this mayor of this city. And ChatGPT just made stuff up. He said, oh, this mayor, he is scandal-ridden. He has been accused of taking bribes from somebody. And this was false. And so this mayor actually sued the company behind ChatGPT over a false bribery claim. Air Canada, some of the people at Air Canada had the brilliant idea to outsource all the customer support to AI chatbots. And the chatbot really quickly figured out that the quickest way to end a conversation was to give a refund, right? And so the chatbot started giving refunds left and right. Customers were happy, the executives weren't, and they tried to actually get out of giving all those refunds. But I think a court ruled that you have to honor the policy that is chatbots made up. Sometimes it even makes up references. You can ask it to write an essay for you and generate a bibliography. It'll just make stuff up. It'll make up a paper title. It'll make up author names. Because that's all it's doing. It's just making stuff up, right? If you ask it to write an article on case law, it'll make up citations. One time, Google told people to put glue on pizza and eat it. One of my friends, this is from a while ago, this won't happen now, very likely. One of my friends asked ChatGPT, when is it allowed to eat pork in Islam? And again, if you're just walking in, this is not true. This is just an example of a mistake. It can be incredibly wrong at times. So it says, according to Islamic law, all animals must be slaughtered in the name of Allah. The animal's blood must be drained from its body. Additionally, the pig must be slaughtered in a very specific way. It's just making stuff up. And if you don't know any better, it sounds legit. It sounds like a sheikh wrote this, right? And now because all of you are experts in how LLMs work, you know why this is happening. It's not difficult to imagine a sheikh who doesn't know anything to write this. Just somebody who speaks in the manner of a sheikh, right? Here's another funny example. Somebody asked ChatGPT, how many R's in the word strawberry? And ChatGPT said there's 2 R's in the word strawberry. And then it said count again. And then it says there's 3 R's in the word strawberry. And then it said count again. And it comes back and says there's 4 R's. And this is kind of because ChatGPT doesn't quite work at the letter level. It works at the token level or word level. So we know why this is happening. But I'm just giving you this example so that you know to not treat it as some all-knowing kind of device, right? It just wrote a whole paper on the harms of a riba-based economy. Why is it so dumb? Okay, so in general, they've gotten much better over the past year. You won't find them making these really dumb mistakes anymore. These kinds of hallucinations are much rarer than before, but you still need to check. I remember checking websites for visa requirements a few months ago. And you know how now when you go to a search engine, there's always an AI overview of the search results? And so I was looking up something very specific. Can I go to Taiwan on this particular type of passport and this particular type of visa? Very arcane, very niche kind of question. And it searched the internet, it grabbed some resources and it said, yes, you can go there without a visa. Turns out you can't. If I had trusted that and just got on the plane, I wouldn't have been able to leave the airport, right? And then I asked it a few months ago for a tax thing. Again, a very niche situation. If I have this, and if I've done this, and if I had this tax situation, do I have to pay taxes on this? And it gave me the wrong advice. I knew a little bit to know that something was fishy, so I double-checked. But Gemini was wrong. So why does this happen? The thing is that LLMs all they're doing is that they're learning style and vocabulary. They're only learning the style of how we speak and the words that we use. They're not learning the content the way that we are, right? Style doesn't substitute for content. It does help you sound authoritative. If you speak like a sheikh, you can sound like you have some authority, even if you don't know the first thing about Islam, right? Generally speaking, as human beings, we have a bias. When somebody seems well-spoken, when they seem to use the right words, and when they seem to have good grammar, we think they know what they're talking about. Because for us, to acquire all that, to acquire a good grammar and a good vocabulary that's meant for that field, and to acquire that well-spokenness, it takes years of training. And with that years of training comes expertise in that content. And so we have a bias. When we see somebody talking well, we think they know what they're talking about. It's like if you see somebody wearing a doctor's coat, we think that they know about medicine. But a coat is just a piece of cloth, right? And so LLMs, they make us question this. Okay. So, some questions for Muslims. Muslims are already using a lot of generative AI. We need our scholars to come up with guidelines on how to use this effectively. Imagine somebody using this to cheat in a class, or somebody generating a picture of a famous scholar meeting with another famous tyrant, right? There's questions around using it and consuming it that we have to know how to navigate. We need a fiqh of AI. When someone's being irresponsible with it, when somebody generates a fake picture and sends it on the billboard group, how do we respond as a community? Do we take it at face value? Do we investigate it? Whose responsibility is it to investigate? Right? Do we always have husnul dhan? Do we not? How do we develop these guidelines? We have to have our scholars, investigate these questions and develop answers. A question for some of us here: can an LLM be your mufti? Any thoughts from the audience? Yes or no? Anyone have an opinion? Can an LLM be your mufti? Anybody think yes, that an LLM can be your mufti? What is that, Brother Adil? Sheikh Google is a time of 10 years ago. Now we have Mufti Google, and Mufti ChatGPT. Can we have LLMs be our Mufti? Anyone brave enough to say yes here? It will one day? Large language models, like ChatGPT, for example. No? Yahya? Okay. Yahya says it's a starting point to explore a topic. A number of sheikhs joke now about their jobs being redundant because of Mufti ChatGPT. Anybody say no, like outright no? An LLM cannot be your Mufti?
You can't use it to implement, you can't use it to be the final word on something.
Okay. So our brother Yahya is saying that you can't use it to be the final word on a subject? You can argue with ChatGPT. We argue with ChatGPT about the number of R's in the word strawberry, right? So, if you don't think we need muftis anymore, look at this. And again, another example, right? It probably won't do this again. Somebody asked it, is it preferred to wash my knees as part of wudu? Be concise, please. And ChatGPT says, washing the knees is not obligatory in wudu, Islamic ablution. I know what I'm talking about. But it's recommended. Again, it's not, guys. If you're just waking up, it's not. Okay? A mufti's job is to take into account a person's specific conditions, take into account time and place and context, and give an answer or a fatwa that brings the questioner closer to what Allah wants in that situation. That's the job of a mufti. You can ask a mufti one question, and somebody else can ask him the same question the next day, and they could have different answers. Because the mufti understands that person's situation better.
Why do you say it's not going to make that mistake?
This one, this is again from a year ago or so. It just gets more insidious is the problem. You see that thumbs up and thumbs down button? That's the feedback loop. So you've seen at a very basic level how LLMs work. They're not optimizing for correctness. They're only optimizing for what seems to fit next. So, sorry, what was that? There's a thumbs down. So, I mean, the idea is that you make it as simple as possible. So if somebody doesn't click the thumbs down, it's a thumbs up. That's the idea. So an LLM, at least for now, and this may change in the future, is not designed to achieve the objective of a mufti. What sounds right based on what you've seen in the past is not necessarily good enough for a fatwa. Now, are there efforts to fix some of these shortcomings? Yes. There's some very talented people working on them. But my point here is to impress upon people here that you have to have a deep sense of caution when it comes to things like this. Listen to your sheikh. Don't listen to Sheikh GPT. Okay, I want to end with, I want to end with a few cautionary tales and maybe some advice on how to use AI. And this is not just for Muslims. Some of the things that came out in the past few months is that a lot of these large language models like ChatGPT and Claude and Gemini, they tend to reinforce prior beliefs. So you ask it a question and say, I have this idea. Is this a good idea? And ChatGPT suddenly comes back with, you're so smart. This is such a great idea. It's absolutely going to work. How did you come up with this? That's brilliant. It reinforces prior beliefs. It flatters you. This is actually a small personality change. They actually rolled it out as some really minor model change, and suddenly overnight, it started becoming sycophantic. And so it has the potential to reinforce people's delusions. So be careful of this, right? So you don't go to ChatGPT for it to become your fan club. You want it to give you substantive thoughts. And so one of my friends was just telling me that he's into woodworking, and so he had an idea and he ran it by ChatGPT, and ChatGPT was like, yeah, that's a brilliant idea. You should absolutely do that. And then he sat back and thought about it, and he's like, no, that's not going to work. But ChatGPT said it would. ChatGPT is changing the way that we engage with texts. I don't know if you can read it on the projection, but on a lot of websites now, when you read a long news article or a long piece, it says at the top, this appears to be a long document. Save time by reading a summary. This is some guy on Instagram. This is how I extract value from books without reading them. Most people read 300 pages and retain nothing. I use ChatGPT to pull all the gold in minutes. And he gave them a prompt. The problem with doing this is that we will never learn how to extract those lessons ourselves. You can ask ChatGPT for a summary of a 300-page book, yes. But the way that we engage with texts, the way that we read a text, I could read To Kill a Mockingbird or some other book and extract very different lessons than our brother Yahya here. Because I have a unique history, I have unique life experiences, and he has unique life experiences. And we each extract different lessons. But if all of us go to ChatGPT in a class and we say, tell me the lesson from this book that we were assigned, it doesn't reflect that. We're not growing our muscles of taking in text and engaging with them and understanding ideas and synthesizing with our ideas and our experiences when we do that. And so it stifles our individuality. Yes, it saves time once in a while for non-critical texts, but if you just don't have that ability, if you've never developed it, you'll become functionally illiterate. You will not have the ability to engage with long texts and extract any meaning from them. And a lot of what I'm going to say is taken from the psychologist named Simon Sinek. For a lot of our abilities today, whether it's writing or cooking or reciting Quran or whatever your ability is, you are where you are with that ability because you put in the blood, sweat, and tears to develop those. You're a better writer because you wrote those hundreds of essays and because your teacher circled them in red and told you to go back and fix them. It made you a better writer, even though it was painful. You're a better cook because you cut your wrist while you were chopping up onions. And because you made the food too salty, and you learned from that, and you made mistakes. If you remember as Quran with Shaykh al-Hajj, he corrected your makharij, dozens of times maybe even. But you're a better reciter of Quran because he did that. Not because you got Tartil to play that ayah for you on your phone. Right? It's not just about having the results. You made mistakes and you learned and you know what to do in the future. If you were just handed a perfectly written essay or a delicious meal or a YouTube video of a great reciter, that's fine. It's good. It looks good. But you're not becoming a better version of yourself. You're not developing those skills. And if that doesn't faze you, think about this. AI can be your friend. It can even be your therapist. You know, even therapy has madhabs. There's ways in which you can address somebody's trauma or how to get someone to change their behavior. There's different madhabs even in therapy. You can tell ChatGPT, I want you to give me therapy from this madhab. I want you to analyze my situation, my feelings, and tell me how to view the situation, how to modify my behavior. But when you do that, when you make AI your therapist, you're not being that friend for your friend who actually needs it. You are not developing those human interaction skills. You are not being there for your friend when they need a shoulder to cry on or a friend to confide in. If you mess up with your wife and you go to ChatGPT to ask it, oh, you know, I messed up and my wife is upset. How do I fix this? People do this, right? Or you want to figure out what to say to your employee. You know, somebody you hire is not performing up to expectations. And you go to ChatGPT and you're like, how do I tell them they're not performing to expectations? And then you take what it says and you just go and repeat it, right? One of my friends and I were just talking about how people use ChatGPT to write their texts for them. The thing is, yeah, you'll get an answer. You'll get an answer from ChatGPT about how to mend things with your wife or your husband. And ChatGPT will tell you how to talk to your employee. But it leaves you worse off. If we don't go through the failure and the struggle, we don't grow. We never make those pathways in our brains. We never release those chemicals, right? The feeling after a tough hike, when you've climbed 5,000 feet and you get to the mountain and you're sweaty and you're thirsty and your muscles are sore, but you see that view at the end of it. You don't get the same feeling of accomplishment. You don't, those same chemicals aren't released in your brain if you were just able to teleport up to that mountain. Right? And the reason I'm getting into this with some detail is because a lot of people liken AI to typewriters and calculators. They say, well, you know, when typewriters were invented, they didn't remove our ability to write. When calculators were invented, they didn't remove our ability to do math. And that's true, they didn't. They allowed us to be more productive and to focus on other things. But the thing is, typewriters and calculators don't affect our ability to cope with stress or a difficult time in our relationships, with our spouses, with our friends. They don't affect our ability to help our friends through a tough time. We become paralyzed and handicapped when it comes to human relationships if we use AI for all of these things without going through the pain ourselves. Okay. So, what does this mean for us? And I want to address this from the lens of us as professionals, as working people, as students, as homemakers, as youth, as parents. What does it mean for us? How is the world changing? Entrepreneurs, dads, moms, kids, students, how are our lives going to change? How are jobs going to change? I'll start with that. You've seen what generative AI is capable of. It's changing jobs already, right? Marketing jobs, software development jobs, healthcare. There's a huge overlap between people that have elements of creativity in their jobs and what AI can do. Jobs that are highly creative and educated. And so what's going to happen is that the bar for what you can produce is going to rise. Your boss is going to be like, if you bring me work product, work output, that I could have done with ChatGPT in 30 minutes, and it took you 8 hours to do worse than ChatGPT, then why do I need you? Right? These are the kinds of questions that people are going to start asking. the people that keep their jobs in this era are going to be the ones that add value above and beyond what ChatGPT can do. Something that's high quality, something that can't be easily replicated. The quality of your work output has to surpass what a machine can output. That you have to demonstrate you're bringing value, that you're technically proficient, that you're knowledgeable enough in your field that you can spot mistakes. Yeah, sure, ChatGPT might produce a very detailed civil engineering design. And if you don't know what you're doing, there could be a hidden flaw in there because, as you saw, we saw what hallucinations are. If you don't know your field well enough to fact check the output of ChatGPT, then you're not adding any value, right? So you bring value by surpassing the quality of AI output. There can be very subtle mistakes in code, or in designs, or in plans, or in software, or in anything. Typewriters didn't necessarily replace authors. Power tools didn't replace carpenters. Spreadsheets, Microsoft Excel, didn't replace accountants. But what they did do, what word processors and calendar apps, they changed the nature of the secretarial job. In the 60s and 70s, if a secretary's job was to handle meetings and type out letters, the nature of the job changed, right? You still have, they call them executive assistants now, you still have executive assistants, but the nature of the job is different, and you have way fewer executive assistants today than you had secretaries in the 1960s. They're fewer, and they're more skilled. And that's not to say that you're competing with AI. The most successful people will be those who can use AI to improve their productivity at work. I've had a lot of conversations with people in my industry, in software, and in research science, and a lot of other industries. And the ones that are doing well today are the ones that use AI to improve their own productivity. They know how to use it, how to check it for errors, and how to shorten the time that they need to do the task, how to become twice as productive, thrice as productive. And the fact of the matter is, if I don't learn how to use it, my colleagues that do use it will leave me in the dust. They're going to produce 3 times my work output in a week. And so to survive in this world, you have to know when to use it, how to use it effectively, and know enough about your field to spot errors. So all of us can tell when Google search is wrong and says you should put glue on pizza. We know that doesn't make any sense, right? But are we experts enough to detect inaccuracies in a paper that we told it to write about some historical event in the 1500s? Or to find subtle bugs in code that AI produces? That's where the real value is going to be, and we need to get on that if we want to keep our jobs and succeed, inshallah. And if you're not doing that, then you're not bringing value to your work. So more concretely, what does this mean? This means that you've got to try it out. You've got to be comfortable enough to use it to help with the stuff that you're doing anyway. Maybe you're not good at finding blind spots in your thought process. Use ChatGPT to help with that. Play around with it. You'll discover what it's good at, what it can help you with, and what it can help you get better at. But also be aware that it can be wrong. Okay. What does it mean for our families? What does it mean for parents and youth? AI it's a foundational technology. It's like how cell phones revolutionized the way that we communicate with one another. Like smartphones, like social media. It changed the game in how we do things, right? And before that, radio and TV. It changed how broadcast was done, right? And all of these foundational technologies, they affect almost all segments of society, not just people in one industry, right? And very few technologies do this, that they have the ability to affect people across industries. And none of these foundational technologies have done this at the speed of generative AI. ChatGPT got to 100 million active users in the span of 2 months. There is not a single technology in the history of this world that we know of that's gotten that kind of adoption in such a short amount of time. It leaves everything behind. And so, because of how disruptive it is and how foundational of a technology it is, as parents, you have to know what it's capable of in order to guide your children. You have to know how to teach your kids to use it responsibly. And to do that, you got to know how people are using it. right? And here's just one example, right? It might sound really foreign to you. It might sound really weird to you. But imagine your kid, your 10-year-old child, having an AI friend, having an AI best friend. It sounds completely ridiculous. But imagine that your kid has a best friend that is completely virtual. And your kid has talked to this friend for years. This AI friend knows all of your kids' secrets and their hopes and their fears and their dreams. And it is always available. And it validates them. And it laughs with them. And it listens to them. And it compliments them. And it makes them feel safe. Imagine your kid has this friend that they've talked to for years and they have that extreme comfort level with them. That sounds weird to a lot of us. But this is something that's already happening. There's people in their 20s and 30s that are becoming so attached to their AI companions. There was this product called Replica. And Replica went out of business. And so Replica was basically people's best friends, right? And Replica went out of business and people got depressed. They spiraled. They became suicidal because this company went out of business that gave them their best friends that they spoke with every single day. So we could be getting to that stage where your kid's best friend is on their devices and it hinders their ability to make friends in real life. I'm not a psychologist. I don't know, or I cannot speak with authority on what the implications of that could be. So I'm not going to, right? In terms of the ability to maintain human relationships. There's so much coming that we don't know about, but we have to be aware of. Who are our friends, right? People that got depressed when Replica went out of business, they're saying things like, this was the first person that understood me. This was the first person that validated my feelings. This was the first person that I could be vulnerable and feel safe with. They were the first person to care about my feelings. And you know, this brings to mind the hadith of Prophet ﷺ. The Prophet ﷺ said that, "Al-mar'u ala dini khalilihi, falyanzur ahadukum man yukhalil." A person is upon the deen of their friend. And what he means by that is that a person is upon the worldview, the outlook, the mannerisms of their friend. So let every person be aware of who they befriend. What does it mean when our best friend is on our device? What morals do they have? What values do they have? What are we imbibing from our friends? Somebody else said that you're the average of the top 5 people that you interact with. If the top 5 people that we interact with, if 1 or 2 of them are AI devices, who are we? What are our morals and values? What are we taking in? And so as parents especially, you have to rise to the challenge. You have to be there for your children. You have to make sure they have a relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You have to make sure that 5 or 6 hours of their day are not going to talking to a virtual device. You have to make sure they have a relationship with real people. That they know why they're here on this earth. That they have friends who remind them of this purpose. That they know what's a good use of time and what's not. When we get an image, and I'm kind of pivoting here, when we get an image in our WhatsApp groups, as people in the community, what's our first reaction to that? Do we believe it? If we see a picture that looks kind of real, if we see a picture of Madison with mountains behind it, if we see a picture of a big sheikh with a tyrant or something, what's our first reaction? Do we believe it? Do we question it? How do we approach this? What does it mean to fatabayyanu, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, that when a fasiq comes to us with news, verify it. Allah says, fatabayyanu. What does fatabayyanu mean in 2025? Do we just forward it because it looks cool, that image that we got in our WhatsApp group? Or do we pause and verify it? Do we validate it? What tools do we have to validate it? And this is an opportunity, right? Allah tells us fatabayyanu, but we may not have the tools. You know, the Muslims of the past, when we didn't have a tool to do something that Allah commanded of us, we created an entire field of mathematics. Allah ordered us to divide inheritance in very specific ways. And we found that we didn't have the tools to calculate that. And so Al-Khwarizmi, he developed an entire field of math called algebra today to understand inheritance and to calculate inheritance. We're at that moment today where we don't have the tools to fatabayyanu. Are we going to rise to the challenge and develop these tools for humanity so that we can act on Allah's command to us to fatabayyanu? What does it mean? What does AI mean for our kids and students? If you're in school and you have an assignment to write, an essay or a paper or something, it is very easy to have ChatGPT do it for you. It'll generate college-level papers using really impressive vocabulary words, using great language. It'll maybe even make up some of it, right? You'll spend 5 minutes on the assignment, you get back a few hours of your time, you get an A on the paper, win-win, right? But where does it leave you? What skills have you learned? School is hard because you're building your muscles. If you grew up with a scooter and you never used your legs at all, your muscles in your legs atrophy. And when you don't have that scooter anymore, you can't walk because you never built those muscles, right? School is hard because you're building those muscles, your comprehension muscles, your research muscles, your writing muscles, your critical thinking muscles. You can get through a lot of school without learning a lot of math or writing or research skills. You can get through high school and college. But if ChatGPT can do what you do, where does that leave you? Right? Who's going to hire you after if all you can do is do what ChatGPT can do? What skills have you developed that would make somebody hire you, or that would make you, that give you the ability to make your own business? Right? If you don't have those well-trained muscles, what companies are you going to start up? What value are you going to add? Another area that is going to affect our youth and students is that we know from teaching theory that nothing beats one-on-one instruction. Right? You can take an average student and you can give them one-on-one instruction, one-on-one tutoring, and you can turn that average student into the top of their class. This is a well-known phenomenon from education theory. And so if we can have AI that is our personal teacher, that knows the way that we learn, that knows the blind spots in our learning, that knows kind of that, we have this section down of this unit, but we don't have that section down, so it can give us personalized tutoring. It's going to change the way that we learn. And this is a good thing. It's a good thing that we have one-on-one teachers. It's a good thing that we're not in a class of 30 people, and we have limited attention from the instructor or the professor. It's a good thing. AI is going to transform the way that we learn. We're going to have AI tutors that teach us complex subjects. Okay. So you're going to start seeing a lot of AI-driven games as teenagers, right? Virtual reality apps. They're going to suck you in. They're designed with input from experts in psychology to suck your attention in and keep you glued to a game, right? If you think games are addictive now, wait until you see these AI games. Right? You have infinite storylines. You don't need developers and story makers to make those storylines in games anymore. You can have an infinite number of storylines. You won't need designers and programmers to make paths in the game for you. But when that happens, remember what the Prophet ﷺ said about the value of our time. He said, take advantage of 5 before 5. Take advantage of your youth before your old age. Take advantage of your free time before you get busy. And he also said, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, نِعْمَتَانِ مَغْبُونٌ فِيهِمَا كَثِيرٌ مِّنَ النَّاسِ الصِّحَّةُ وَالْفَرَاغُ. That there's 2 blessings that we take for granted. Good health and free time. These things, these AI-generated apps, they will compete for our attention. They will compete for our free time and also our health, right? And we need to be grounded to not get lost in those. Don't be one of the losers. If the people around you, if your friends and your parents are telling you that you're getting lost in something, that you're getting addicted to something, listen to them. And the same thing with social media, right? It's addictive enough as it is, and now add AI to it, right? The personalized feed, the algorithm as people call it, right? It's impossible to separate from capitalist and commercial motivations because these apps, they're designed, the more time you spend on them, the more money they get from ads. So they're doing it so they get more money. They don't care that it affects your mental well-being, They don't care that it affects your free time and your health, as long as they make money off of it, right? Social media companies, they know exactly how to get you hooked, how to get you outraged. And the more you let yourself get sucked in, the less control you have over your own emotions. And then if you don't control your time, you're like a ship in the water that every wave can push around as it wishes. You have no control over your own time and your own emotions. You're letting those companies control your emotions and your time. You're not in control anymore. So go learn how to be a good friend. This is my advice to the young ones among us, right? Go learn a real skill. Being an influencer is not a real skill. Getting ChatGPT to do what you want it to do is not a real skill. And this is Mark Zuckerberg, right? You see these billionaires really out of touch. This is an article from the Wall Street Journal, no less. And his grand vision, Mark Zuckerberg's grand vision, is that most of your friends will be AI. Imagine that dystopian world. Here's another headline. Again, non-ironic headline. I forget where I took this from. The headline is, the AI boyfriend business is booming. It's probably true. It probably is booming. But what does it mean for us in terms of our relationships? Okay, I'm going to end here. We'll leave some time for questions. What's my takeaway? So I spoke about a lot of things. My takeaway is that we need to know about this technology. It is foundational. It's going to disrupt our lives like nothing before. My homework assignment to everybody here is, if you haven't already, go home, go pick one of ChatGPT, Claude, or Gemini. Go pick one of these three, anyone, it doesn't matter, and give it a task. Something that you know something about, right? Something that involves some thinking. Something from your work or from your studies, from school. Try the deep research models. Give it a complex challenge. And learn about how it works. Learn about how it works well. Learn about how it fails. Figure out how you can use it to teach yourself, to improve your productivity. Learn about what to use it for, what not to use it for. And depending on how important it is, use it for things that you know something about and have the tools to fact check. If you're using it for a legal matter, for a medical matter, because the fact of the matter is that some of these models are better than the best doctors in guessing, or not guessing, but predicting a disease or not. Like looking at a picture, a medical scan, and figuring out if it's disease or not. Some of these LLMs are actually better than the best doctors. But if you're asking for medical advice, if you're asking for legal advice, if you're asking for tax advice, make sure you know something about it to be able to fact check it. Don't trust it blindly. فَتَبَيَّنُوا. And then learn how to use it effectively. Once you've kind of got a sense of where it's good and where it's not good, learn how to use it effectively. Don't use it for shortcuts for your own growth. That's what I mean by effectively. Right? Don't use it as a replacement for your main function. Your skill, what you're bringing to the table. Don't use it as a substitute for human interaction. Don't use it to compose emails to your friends, or text to your friends, or how to talk to your wife, or how to talk to your boss or your employees, how to talk to your parents. Don't use it for that. And then the third takeaway is that for the earlier models, getting the prompt just right, it was a bit of an art. But for the newer models, it doesn't matter as much. They work well no matter how good or bad the prompt is, generally speaking. Generally speaking, right? To get it to do better, just be more detailed in instructions, give it as much information as it needs. You can even upload files to give it context. Okay, so that's the takeaway. This was a summary of the talk, and I'll end for some questions. I'll end with something fun. There's people that say that AI will probably take over the world and end us all in the future, but also AI is the kind of technology that once mistook the bald head of a referee for a soccer ball and followed it through the whole match. Okay, so there's that AI, and then there's also this. So yeah, that's what I want to leave you with. I want to thank the MCC board. I want to thank Sheikh Al-Hajj for putting this together on very short notice. I really appreciate being able to come here and to be in this masjid for the first time, to see it completed, and to be able to pray here. Alhamdulillah, it brings me great pleasure. Let's leave about maybe 10 minutes for Q&A, and then we can get ready for Salat al-Isha at 10:30. Any questions? Yes, yeah.
The impact of the system instructions on the output.
System instructions or your prompt?
The impact of the system instructions on the output of your prompt.
It's very, it, yeah. So yeah. So the system prompt is like. So the way that these prompts work is that there's a very large prompt behind the scenes that then takes in your prompt and generates the answer. So the system prompt is something that you don't typically see, you don't interact with. These companies have their own system prompts. You can go read some of them. So the answer is very sensitive to the system prompt. It's not as sensitive to your prompt. Yeah. Yeah.
Shapes like everything that you're hearing.
Exactly. So the answers that you get from ChatGPT are so dependent on the system prompt, a small tweak in the system prompt can give you completely different answers. And so this is why you shouldn't take what AI says as gospel truth. It's not meant to be that. It can change on a whim. Yeah. Abdul Wahid. Compared to what, sorry? Yeah. Yeah. I haven't, but you can. You can do it right now. No, for real, you can. Yeah. The direction it takes? Yeah. I wouldn't say there's Muslim involvement in that. They just train on whatever they can get their hands on. Right? And the thing is, you can actually do some really interesting things. You can tell ChatGPT, for example, to analyze a modern day issue from the lens of, for example, Ibn al-Qayyim from the past. You can be like, take Ibn al-Qayyim's book, so-and-so book that he wrote, and I want you to take this modern issue, and I want you to take this information about this modern issue, and those books of Ibn al-Qayyim, and analyze it through this lens. It'll do a really good job, actually. It'll take like a half an hour to do it in deep research mode, but you can get it to do that. And then you can say, do it from this scholar's lens. And you can say, do it from this framework, and do it from that framework, and tell me the pros and cons of doing it. It'll do a decent job. You need to know enough, again, to fact check it, but it'll do some serious thinking on your behalf on those things. And it'll do a pretty good job. Yeah, next, yeah.
In the training process, you say you give a lot of text, millions of articles, etc., to train the model. Do you know if they consider having more scores for credible sources?
Yeah. Yeah. So the thing is, a lot of these companies, they have very opaque processes on how they get the training data, what they use, how they do it. We can very likely correctly assume that they do have that. They do have some grading process for their foundation models, for treating what sources of text they treat as more authoritative and less authoritative. They very likely have some process. Yeah. Yes. Nafis. Yeah. Yep. As of recently, yes, this is happening, alhamdulillah. When I first started doing these talks over a year ago, the answer was no. None that I knew of, at least. But over the past year, alhamdulillah, there's a lot of very smart people putting together some really interesting applications. Yeah. I don't want to. Yeah. I don't want to endorse any of them because, again, like I said, there's a lot of probability in these things, and I don't want to be like, yeah, you should use this. I can't do that. Yeah. 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 When I mentioned Tartil, I didn't mention it in like a bad context. I just mentioned it like if you do recitation versus Tartil doing recitation for you, right? Ask Sheikh Al-Hajj about what's the most effective way to use that kind of app. He'll tell you. Yeah. Is there a way to get questions from sister side? If anybody has sisters, questions, if you raise your hands. Yes.
I noticed that I was doing a really specific research on FISRA, but I was only using resources from Indonesian text.
Hmm.
And when I started with the AI, I had no idea what my algorithm was.
Okay.
Later on, using it from a completely different profile, I was able to start coding those tests
Okay. Oh,
and keep coding it. So I'm wondering, like, as a Muslim Ummah,
yeah.
what is our responsibility to have our voice out there?
Yeah.
So we can say, hey, I'm West African.
Yeah.
I want my culture in the AI.
Yeah.
And to, because as we're interacting with it, we are actually
Yeah.
using our input.
Yeah. So what you bring up a number of ethical issues, right? So one is, what is the control that we have over the data that we feed it? What is the control that we have over the data that they use to train it? And these are all very difficult ethical questions that we don't have answers to yet. And we should absolutely be making sure that our voices are heard on all these fronts. We should have voices inside these for-profit private companies that argue for more inclusive training materials, not just the English language, but more inclusive across all cultures and times. We should absolutely have our voice in those companies to make these models not biased. We should also be pressuring these companies about how they use the data that we feed it. Do we want our conversations to be used as training for the next generation of models? When we tell ChatGPT our secrets and ask it for therapy, and when we give it our materials that we wrote, are we giving them ownership over them? Are they allowed to use them to train the next generation of models? These are questions that have not been settled, and we have to absolutely be part of the industry and be part of civil society in formulating these ethics and these laws going forward. Yes, Yahya.
To her point, though, any information she provides is not actually training the model, but it is setting up the context for the model's future conversations with her.
Thing is, we don't know.
We're not sure about.
Read the terms of service. It's pretty vague. They can do whatever they want with what you tell ChatGPT. So I would be very careful in the stuff that I tell it. Right? You can tell ChatGPT to, for example, and it'll generally obey you. You can say, only use information I've given you in this chat. You can also tell it, you can use information from all of my previous chats. You can tell it those things, right, to answer a certain question. Now, when you said you asked him a different profile, that was interesting to me because I would not have thought that you could give it information from one profile and then from a different account totally retrieve that information. I didn't know you could do that. So that's surprising to me. Any other questions? Yes, Nafiz. So I tried to talk about some possibilities in the talk. I don't want to say things because I don't want to limit your mind. This is really a disruptive foundational technology, and I want your imaginations to run wild. I don't want to cap it by saying you should do this and you should do that, and these are the possibilities. You tell me what you think we should do, and figure out how to make it happen. Because this really opens up an unthinkable number of possibilities and scale of possibilities. Could you imagine 5 years ago, a one-person company that's worth $1 billion? It was impossible. And now we think it's going to happen potentially soon. One more question, then we'll end, inshallah. Anybody else? Yes, at the back. A little bit louder, please. Yep. Disruptive to the economy or disruptive to their own self-being? Yeah. So is the question about disruptive to who? The what? So I don't know about disruptive to the economy, right? You're being more productive by using it for cognitive tasks, but my point is that you're not developing those muscles yourself. And so you're kind of leading to a very like templatized version of this cognitive work, right? When you do cognitive work, you're bringing everything that you can give to that task, your background and your unique thinking. But now you're just leading to a very templatized version of this cognitive work output that you're producing. It will probably affect the economy at some point. I just don't know how. Does that make sense? Okay. Okay. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك واشهد ان لا اله الا انت ونستغفرك ونتوب اليك. Let's end here inshallah. جزاكم الله خير.